Yo, what up? It's Joe. We're going to review the Samsung G9 Odyssey. I've owned it for 6 months since March of 2021, and hopefully this will help you make a decision if you want to buy it or not. I'm going to dive straight into gaming. I'm not going to go too much into specs because I assume you know the baseline specs and that you're just researching if you want to actually drop, $1,500 on this monitor. So right now I'm playing Star Wars Old Republic. It supports 32 by 9 pretty well. You can see when I am just driving around in the speeder, which you do a lot in this game. I have my map up on the right, and I have like the mini map in the bottom right, character sheet, mail, chat on the left side of my screen. We just jumped into a cutscene since this is kind of where this game shines, and you can see there's a lot in the background. You can see a lot more, and it's very immersive because when you're actually centered in the screen, that 1000R curve is phenomenal. It doesn't make your eyes strain a lot. Everything's in your peripheral vision, and it's really, really subtle, but it's very, very nice, and you'll eventually get used to it. And then when you go back to a flat monitor, it'll be weird. You will not like it as much because you'll miss all that extra space that you get used to. And you may be thinking, well, Joe, you can just get a 4K monitor, or, I can just get a 21 by 9 just ultra wide monitor. I don't need the super ultra wide 32 by 9. And trust me when I say this, I gamed on a 4K 43-inch TV. I hate jaggies. I don't like when games don't have high pixel density, and it drives me insane. I like really crisp, clean graphics. I like all the extra pixels 4K gives, but this monitor is better in my opinion. I like that it has 240 frames because for games like Star Wars, it's not graphically taxing. It's an old game, but this thing is running at about 140 to 180 FPS. I have a 7700K and a 3090, and the CPU is bottlenecking it really hard. But it is nice that you can play older games and actually use the 240 hertz refresh rate because it gets more difficult the more modern the games are, and it just depends on how well optimized it is. The other piece that I want to bring to your attention is you can kind of see the glare on the middle, a little to the right on the top of the monitor. And so if you purchase this monitor, it does have a matte coating, but just be aware that light sources behind you can interact weirdly on the curve. So you want to be mindful of your setup when you buy this. If you have a direct light source behind you, well, that may not work, and it may be very distracting when you're playing games, depending on how well lit you like playing games. So this is the lightest footage I have, where I have some nanoleafs behind me that are on, but they are not directly behind me. They're kind of just in the room. But I just want to bring that to your attention. Be aware the curve can reflect light in weird ways depending on your setup. Now I'm going to switch to some different footage of playing Fenyx Rising. It just is one of the only open world games I already had installed. And you'll see I'm in the menus. This game actually started, I haven't launched it in a long time, but it actually started in 2560 by 1440. And it was in a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. So it was all stretched. It looked super weird. And this happens a lot with this monitor. For games that support it, it will do weird stuff on launch, and you're going to have to mess with it almost every single time. And then once you set it, you don't really need to worry about it, but just be aware. You can also see right now on the left and right those little kind of like insignia blue areas. That is the extra 16 when in the 32 by 9. And then the center was the 16 by 9. And then this is the actual game. So in the actual game, it looks great, but you can see I'm kind of flipping through the menus because I couldn't remember how to even play this game because I haven't played it in forever. But so in the actual game, it looks awesome. Like you can see that galaxy, you can see, all the buildings on the left and right, and it's awesome. All that extra screen space makes a big difference when you play almost any type of game. I've played shooters, open world, MMOs. I really love this monitor for video games. It's fantastic. Multiplayer, single player, whatever it is, if it's supported, you're going to have a good time. And you should also see, this is a darker scene. I actually turned off my nano leafs. This is usually how I use the monitor. I just kind of turn on the Philips Hue lights I have on the back of this monitor, and it looks awesome. There's just no words to describe it. I've never had a monitor that I like as much as this one, and it does have its issues, and I'll dive into that later, but I just want to sing its praises in video games where it just works, and it's fantastic. And so now you might be saying, Joe, this is great, but I don't play video games enough to justify my purchase. And if you're like me, you may work at home, or you may be involved in freelance work, or just, you use your PC for other stuff, and you don't always feel like playing video games. And right now, I want to show you why this monitor also is amazing for productivity. So if you look at this scene, I'm actually recording the audio right now in Premiere Pro Adobe. I've never used it before. I actually learned to do this video, and so I'm still learning. But I don't know what this program looks like without all this screen space. And I know some other reviewers have shown like, hey, editing video is awesome, and I don't know what it's like to edit on a 16:9, but I would agree that the timeline being so humongous is great. It's very helpful. And so the other piece that I want to show is just how much screen space you do have. I'm just kind of moving around the Adobe Premiere Pro. I mean, you can resize it. I know you can download like grid software. I personally don't use grid software just because I'm lazy, and I just kind of throw my windows all over the place. And so like here I have Microsoft Store, blah, 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 whatever, File Explorer. Like I don't know how you organize your windows, but there's a lot of space to do it. And you might be also thinking now, well, I have a work laptop. I have a computer I can't install software on, so I can't use the grid, or it doesn't support, this insane 5120 by 1440p. And there's a way that you can split this into two seamless 1440p screens. I think you can change them to 1082, but I don't know why you'd want to, because it'd make the text be hard to read. But so I'm going to jump into the monitor menu to enable the picture-by-picture mode, which is really awesome. It is plugged into my 3090, so I have two display ports plugged into my 3090, and it takes a little bit. You saw, it went black, came back up, and it shows two different inputs. And so now it is actually two different screens. The way Windows recognizes this is two 2560 by 1440p screens, and you can see I'm moving it around, and it'll snap to the grid of my 1440p, and it's pretty neat. It's hard to see because I have a 5120 by 1440p background, but right here I'm showing you, the display settings. There's 1 and 2. There's two monitors, and this isn't something that I saw in other reviewers' videos, and I think it's critical because if you work from home like me, or if you do something technical where you need, two separate screens, maybe you have Visual Studio open, or like a text editor, or you just like having multiple screens of different stuff. It's a pretty neat feature, and it works really well. Depending on the GPU, I think it honestly just maxes at 60 hertz. I haven't really worried that much about it because I only really use it when I do my work laptop. But it's also helpful because you may be looking at this monitor and be thinking, I don't have a graphics card that can push, a 5120 by 1440p. So how am I going to utilize this? And you technically could do this with, like, I have a work laptop that goes into a laptop dock, and it'll support 2560 by 1440p for productivity, but it will not support a 5120 by 1440p very well because it just can't really handle it, and it caps out at like 30 hertz, I think, and it's terrible. So this is an option for two setups. Maybe you have like a keyboard switch or whatever, like the USB switch, and you can just turn on picture by picture and switch the inputs, and there you go. You know, you have your PC for your home connected to one, and you have, you know, the other two ports, an HDMI and a display port or whatever, connected to the monitor as well, and you can just switch. And that's actually what I do. I don't have my work laptop here, but I do use this monitor to write code, send emails, all of that stuff. And the curve doesn't distort the text. Like, my eyes don't hurt. I used to have the G9 Odyssey 32-inch. That actually was like my dip into the 1000R curve before buying this monitor. And I did not like it. It was actually hard to read SQL, honestly. The text just wasn't very crisp because that monitor for the 32 inches is in like the low 90s for pixel per inch, or like pixel density, versus this monitor is in the hundreds. So it's very comparable to a 4K monitor. It's very crisp, it's easy to read, it doesn't hurt your eyes, and that's something that others don't really talk about, in my opinion. And then the last thing before I forget is I had a 4K screen and I could not present anything when I worked remote. So when you do this picture by picture, your 5120 by 1440p is not going to share well in Teams or Skype or Zoom or whatever it is. You'll need to use the picture by picture, because displaying 1440p, or maybe you make it 1080 depending on, you know, the bandwidth of your company, it'll allow you to share screens easily and still have, you know, two screens and it's all on this big one. And I think that is another feature where, you know, I needed that. Skype, when I was using it, did not support 4K at my company, and it was just a pain to jump into 1080p. All my icons got messed up, all the zooming, and it was just a hassle. When now with picture by picture, this is very, very simple for me. And you just saw, like, I switched back to the normal screen to end this audio clip, and it's quick. It's kind of just like, you know, done. And so one of the things that isn't very good about this monitor is it cracks. If you hear this. So this happens pretty often on both sides. And so it is kind of concerning. Yes. It just does that as it heats up and cools down. It always kind of does that. People online have mentioned, you know, sometimes it does go away, and it has dissipated, but when I turn it on and turn it off, when I first got it, it was crazy loud, and it still does it, but I think that I'm just used to the crackling noises now. I don't really think it never went away for me. So just be aware, that's one of the things I don't like about the monitor. It's not a deal breaker, but for how much money it costs, it's really annoying that you have to hear this. I don't think it's cracking anymore, but it's just kind of like the plastic. It goes like that. Yeah, this is exactly what it would sound like. It doesn't crackle a ton, but just be aware that happens on this monitor, and it does happen on some other ones too. So it's nothing to be concerned about. And then another thing, I actually was able to capture this, is I have a valve index, and when I have it plugged in and to the display port of my 3090, for some reason my monitor does this, and the only way to fix it is I actually have to unplug the power and then restart it, and unplug the valve index as well, since it will go to sleep and then it can't wake up again. So just be aware it does weird stuff like this. There's two things that I don't use of the original pieces in my build. The first being the stand. It is a little too low for me. This is as high as it goes, and it can go down and it can tilt. But what was happening is I would kind of look down, and this isn't necessarily a con, but this white piece pops off. So when you need to, you know, mount it, it will pop off like this. Be very careful when you put this into the monitor, because I believe the instructions tell you, you know, mount it on the stand and then pull it out. Just make sure that your white piece is taken off, because it'll be really scary when you're trying to move it. The other piece that I don't use is the cable management piece. Here is where you have your USBs for firmware updates, display port, HDMI. Here would be the power and the serial number and things of that nature. They all wire through here, and it looks pretty slick when you have it rigged up, but there's all these prongs, and when you actually have it in, it makes it almost impossible to actually change any of your inputs, any of the cables, and it's just kind of a pain in the butt. My rig is faced towards the wall, so no one can even see the back, so I just don't use it. It's just some things that I just want you to be aware of, and it's really your preference. In summary, I would say this monitor and whether you should buy it really depends on your needs. It's pretty niche, it's very expensive, and some people just don't have really the space. So you just kind of have to think, how will this fit in my setup? You know, is it worth it to me? Will I play enough games? Will I use it enough for work? And am I prepared for it to be, you know, finicky? The main thing I would say is if you do buy it, make sure you buy a new one, because I believe around October 2020 is when Samsung started to fix this monitor. Because from what I understand, when it originally released in 2020, in like June, there was a whole bunch of issues where people had lemons and bricks and flickering and all this weird stuff. So just buy a new one. The manufacture date is on the back left, underneath where you would put the panel, right next to the power supply. This one was specifically in December 2020. It doesn't have any issues other than being a little quirky, but the 3090 in itself is very quirky. It does weird things when I plug it into my LG OLED. So maybe it's not the monitor, maybe it's both. So just keep that in mind where I was showing you how it was being goofy with the menus. And really, if this video helped you at all in your decision, whether you're going to buy it or whether you're not, please press the like button. I'd really appreciate it. If you have any questions, just drop some comments and I'll answer them, since, I mean, I use this every day. It's on right now. I'm using it to make the video. So if you have any questions, seriously, just drop a comment. And in the future, I will be making more product reviews in, you know, tech, maybe some Star Wars collectibles and some video games, just stuff that I personally enjoy that hopefully my opinion can make an impact and help people make decisions whether they want to buy stuff or not.